Blue Antler is a liminal place. A place where knowledge lies in sun-filled meadows, and wisdom slumbers in the deepest shadows of the forest. Profound inner knowing comes when we touch the unknown. Our unions with the mysteries drive us onward. Our liminal conversations explore the lives of those who have touched the unknown. What was it like to experience the mysteries? How did they discover their path? Join my search for whispered secrets and hidden wisdom. Who knows? It may help you discover your path. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Blue Antler, Whispered Secrets and Hidden Wisdom, a Discover Your Path podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be talking with Tate O'Shaughnessy. Now, Tate and I were the ones who started initially the Blue Antler retail store. We're going to talk about that a little bit in today's episode. So because of that, I thought it was very appropriate for him to be the first guest we have on the show. He has a very interesting story, and one filled with so many layers upon layers of interesting liaisons or engagements with the unknown, whether forced or sought after. He has a really great story, and I hope that you feel inspired and you become inspired by it. And who knows, maybe part of his story will help you to discover your story and your path. Enjoy today's discussion with Tate. I feel like it's extremely appropriate that you are one of the first guests on Blue Antler podcast, because you and I started Blue Antler, the store, together. And just this morning, I had a Facebook memory that was of a Facebook Live where you and I, after we opened the store, that had those Whispering Woods cards that I love to pull. And it was the card for five or 6 years ago was Reconnect. So I thought that was super appropriate for today, since you and I were going to talk on Blue Antler podcast.
Yes. Very appropriate.
It was, yes. So, when you and I met back in 2009, you were on a very different, not different, but I don't want to call it a different path, but your path back then was not what it is today. How did you kind of start in spirituality or developing any of these things or ideas for yourself? Because you grew up in a non-Christian household or a non-religious household. Is that correct?
Yes.
How did someone who basically grows up with no religion, what has been your path to finding, maybe, did you feel like there was a need for you to fill that space?
Yes. I think in my teens, there was some stuff with abilities and using energy to get rid of headaches for certain people, and learning how to do that kind of stuff. And from there, because of my past, I was seeking, I think, healing through spirituality and different ways of doing that.
So real quick, because not everyone knows you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean when you say your past?
I am a survivor of pretty severe child abuse for about 15-ish years of all the different physical, mental, verbal, sexual, all the abuse you can think of. And it was pretty intense, culminating in rape, where I had to have surgery. So that kind of set me on the intense path of first going into counseling, typical Western counseling, and from there really starting to look into alternative methods of healing.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you for giving us that little bit of a background.
Uh-huh.
So, that's actually a lot of a background. Now, you said in your teens that you could pretty much, you knew you could manipulate energy. Now, I can imagine, and it wouldn't be a stretch for me to say, okay, your first encounter with the mysteries or the unknown happened because you gained the ability to check out or leave your body during these really traumatic experiences, and that relieved some of that experience. So would you say that those were your first instances touching or the unknown or experiencing the mysteries, or was that just a mere tool? The escaping was a tool to then be able to touch the unknown and the mysteries, later on down the road as you started to begin to explore spirituality?
I think a combination, because I think that I did touch and I did realize the safety in, quote, going away, which is what I called it. And from there, when I was able to do journey work, it wasn't a new or fearful or strange thing to do because I already knew how to do it.
Yeah, you were uncomfortable with, or you were comfortable with, I guess modern people would call it astral projection. Yeah.
Right.
Whatever, yeah, whatever word we want to use for your spirit entity, part of you, that when it leaves your body. Besides death, we don't want to call it death.
Right.
So, what was your first stop on your path that involved any type of spiritual practice?
In my late teens, I started walking into different forms of witchcraft, trying to work with the elements and herbs and ritual to kind of, I guess, part of me probably wanted to control things because that's what I sought was control, but also to just learn about those things. So I studied with some people. I studied books, obviously. Oregon being a state that doesn't have a huge, intense religious, I guess,
Identity, maybe? Yeah.
community. Yeah. So there's a little bit more freedoms for some things, I think. So yeah, that was my first. It was a pretty deep dive into witchcraft, forms of witchcraft.
In that part of your life, are there things you adopted or cultivated, practices, ideas, things that are still incorporated in how you interact today with your spirituality? Are they part of your practice?
Yes. I still walk with a lot of the ideas of, working with herbs, working with natural forces, working with the elements, any of that stuff. I may not do as much spell work now, but I still use that and use the concepts and ideas of it.
And in that...
And journey work.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That was it. I was just saying, and journey work was something that's still very big.
In that time, when you were practicing witchcraft in the early days,
mm-hmm.
were there instances where you felt like you, or not felt, were there instances where you touched the unknown? And how did it touch you back, I guess, is like, how did that interaction with the unknown or the mysteries change you?
Yes, for sure. I think it was the idea that some places, most places, but especially like valleys or places where rivers meet something else or spread out a little bit and slow down, learning the concepts that energy can pool in those areas and sometimes almost have all of their own, like an entity all its own. And you can touch that. And that started me on the concept that there is more out there, and that sometimes the things that you're dealing with, and it's not saying that it's not big, but it's that there is other ways of looking at it. So instead of being stuck in my, anger or my frustration, I could tap into this bigger whatever, and it helped me release and feel calm.
Well, one of the things I really liked about what you said was that that it drove you to like keep looking, to keep engaging, to keep trying for new experiences and things. And my question is, when you talked about it pooling in like where a river widens. So that was beautiful imagery, by the way, and it made me wonder: did you only feel that when you were in nature, or was it something that was maybe in the beginning tied to nature? You interacting with the mysteries or the unknown, or was that kind of just a really beautiful imagery for how it looks to you?
I purposely sought out places like that drew me. So I would, if I hiked, I would open myself up and kind of let myself be drawn to places that gave me that sense. Some places did, some places didn't feel as, connected. I was in a smaller area, not big city of Portland at the time. I was down in Southern Oregon. So yes, and I was raised on over 400 acres, so I had a lot of land. I think the connection to nature has always been huge for me. The connection to non-human, maybe. And that could just be from what I went through, or it could just be how I connect.
Yeah, true. And that makes complete sense. What did it feel like?
To connect to it?
Yes. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, was there a first experience that opened the door? That was your first, oh my God, there's something so much more.
Besides doing healing work, that kind of thing, but tapping into other stuff. Yeah, there was a couple times going out, being by myself in the middle of nature, middle of the forest, and just feeling kind of a connection. And from there, stepping into a place that was maybe, there was a valley by where I lived that I would go to sometimes. And it felt old and comfortable, and safe. So if I was somewhere where the river or the creek, was running quickly, sometimes the energy felt a little different. If I went somewhere where the water spread out and things slowed down, then I felt that energy differently. So I started learning different things about it. And that's when I first started connecting to the wind, because the wind was something that calmed me. That when the wind would blow, it felt like it would disconnect me a little bit and I could breathe.
Wow. What would you consider your next, I don't know, maybe initiatory gate that you passed through, right? Like what was the next stop for you that would have been a dot on the map?
I started going to a place in Washington called Nakata. It's no longer, the place is no longer there. The town is. Nakata was, there was a man who was mixed, and he called it the path of beauty. And I met a wide array of different people from Seattle, Portland, and surrounding area. We did forms of lodges, not true a nipi ceremony or sweat lodges, but a form of a lodge, like almost a sauna. We did some journey work there, and in that, I really stepped deeper into non-witchcraft stuff and more into going inside more and connecting from that way into other things around me. And then also connecting to people, because there was people there who were goddess worshippers. There were people there who walked witchcraft, Christian, whatever.
And what was the time frame between Southern Oregon and Nakata?
So Southern Oregon, I was late teens, the first year of my 20s. I studied and practiced witchcraft stuff into my 20s, and then I kind of stepped back a little bit and just was a young person in a big city partying. Then I met my stepkid's father, and that was my focus, was the kids and being a dad and stuff. And then we started going to Nakata together just to kind of have a place that was spiritual, that accepted both him as a Christian and me as a non-Christian. So that was probably 29. And then I was with Nakata until about 34. And that was everything from the lodges to retreat weekends where we worked on I'm trying to think of all the different names, but we'd have one where it was all of us just leaning against each other. We did where we'd pick a partner and you'd stare into their face and relax, and it was kind of a shape-shifting concept. Connections, just different things like that. And that was, from there, led me to the path that I walked when I met you for so many years.
So I find it, well, let me ask you. I have found those experiences in like the sauna or a sweat lodge I was invited to a couple of times. I have found those experiences to be profoundly simplistic and weighty and unencumbered with bullshit. And a place where I was able to be in different relation to the unknown or to the mysteries, maybe. So my question for you is, how did those experiences, in the beginning, let's stay with Nakata for a second before we move into your next phase. In Nakata, how did beginning to do those form of hot enclosed space, how did that work for you? How did that go? How did that inform where you are now, and what were your experiences there? Yeah, maybe. Well, that's a lot of questions. Sorry, right? But that's where I want you to go. I think I'm interested in hearing that.
I think first, I think that saunas and lodges are amazing for people. I hate them. I hate being stuck inside tight spaces, and I hate to be hot. So it pushed me through a lot of stuff, challenged my boundaries a lot. But I was able to start opening up some of the tight held shields I had on me. Tight held, I held everything very tight because I had been hurt so many times. So I learned a lot about trust. I learned a lot about that sometimes the next breath allows you to actually breathe. Because I think we as people tend to stop when it gets a little uncomfortable. So sometimes you just take one more breath and then it's not uncomfortable anymore. And I also learned, to trust myself with tending fires for Nakata or at Nakata, helping lead some of the ceremonies sometimes. And, being around men and not feeling so much like I needed to control the situation in the way that I knew how.
Because your abuse happened from men. Yeah. And
Yes.
yeah. I feel like one of the keys to the kingdom, as it were, is held in what you said about sometimes it's just about taking the next breath and not holding your breath. And I think that's a fucking brilliant, actually. I think that's key. It's key. Can you think back to or remember a specific time in a lodge, in one of those type of experiences at Nakata, where you just were connected, and it was and what did that feel like, or where did it take you?
Well, the very first one I did there was intense. It was beautiful. It was one of those moments that you read about where it's like, all of our energies connected, and it was so perfect and all that good stuff. And you come out and you have we always had a meal afterwards, and it was like that moment of connection with people. And since I have been very cautious with connecting with people, it was huge for me. And I do remember that weekend driving home and just feeling bliss. And, going back to Portland, to the big city, I felt amazing and life was wonderful. And yeah, that very first one was one of the most intense ones. They were all beautiful, but that was like, damn.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. So, from Nakata, where then? How did that evolve?
After Nakata, I had heard about another place that was in off of Mount Hood. It used to be on one of the islands by Portland, but it moved up to by Mount Hood. And I had heard about this person who did lodges that were very intense, quote, warrior lodges. And I wasn't sure about what that meant, but heard about it, ignored it, didn't think anything of it. Then I met my ex, my former husband, who's gone from us now, and he was already going up there. And so I went with him. The first time I just kind of was there and helped with a lodge. He was tending fire. And I slowly went from not a lot of stuff, just kind of casual, to stepping pretty deep into that. And that was based on Lakota traditions. So that was, stepping into that. Huge, it was a pretty big community at the time.
Before we jump into that, because during that period of your life is when I met you. Let me ask you this. I want to go back to witchcraft for a second. How did that part of, we'll call it the spirituality piece of pie in your whole pie tin, right? How did that then flavor or affect your daily life, and how did it add to it?
I think with the concepts that I studied with witchcraft, and it wasn't just witchcraft. I also studied Irish mythology and some Indo-European stuff. So it was kind of the concepts of that. That I think helped me sometimes maybe step away from the day-to-day, but it mainly gave me a solid foundation to use herbs, use energies in witchcraft, use small maybe spell things to walk with my life. From stress times to calm times to our household. My household was very set up in that way. And so we honored, the Sabbats, we honored different traditional things. We would have certain dinners, dinner for the dead, all those types of things. And so it just kind of made me instantly think about things instead of just doing something.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And with Nakata and this idea of finding connection and finding bliss and adding community, more community, especially the community of having adult men in, and breaking down some of that old scar tissue, maybe we can call it. What impact that? How did you see that then influence or affect your daily life at that point? Then living in the big city instead of smaller town, Southern Oregon, but how did that then begin to flavor the stew that was Tate's life in Portland during that time period?
Well, I think when I first moved to Portland before Nakata, sex and sexuality was dirty still because it had been taught to me that way because of the abuse. So I dealt with that thing, and I think I used sex for a while as a weapon or as a shield. If someone was, if I knew and I could get into that zone with them, then I was in control pretty much. And I learned through the years, especially through Nakata, that sexuality, was beautiful, and that it didn't have to have this or that. It could be such a huge plethora of different concepts and ideals. It doesn't mean you have to be monogamous. You don't have to, I learned a lot about those types of things with these men. And that was beautiful. That helped me open up and step past that idea that sex is a weapon and sexuality was a weapon.
I think that's pretty brilliant. So, we're now to the, can I call it the Red Road?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I walked. That was the path that we walked. Is it traditional? I don't know what is traditional really, because some would call what we did res traditions, and some would call it washishu or white person traditions. There's so many different ways. Everybody's going to have an opinion anyways.
So. That's very true. How long had you been with that community when I met you?
When you met me, I had been with the community probably 8-9 years.
That's quite a while. And you had some very big experiences there, not just being married to somebody who is also a member of the community, but was, I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb, and you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
But in this part of your journey, a part of your path, this was probably the first time you experienced initiatory practices and in such a full and non-instantaneous gratification way. And by that I mean, I know that you prepped for a minimum of a year before you encountered some of these things that, if you would like to talk about in a moment, you're more than welcome to. I would love that. And it was a full year of preparation, and that would have, to me, been something that is pretty foreign for where I grew up, and not necessarily something that I had to work for that intensely. So, is that true? Was this the first place that you actually had kind of experienced these initiatory practices that were so big?
Yes. Yeah, because besides learning that type of lodging, or a nipi, the sweat lodge there, which is much more intense and more focused, prepping for a ceremony that we would call vision quest, or crying for a vision, leche. You prep for a year, everything from tying specific amount of prayer ties to first you offer to, go on the hill. And then everything from food to the prayer ties to lodges, you prep for a year. And then when you're at the site to do the ceremony with the person who's putting you on the hill, you could be told you're not ready. Or you could say you're not ready. So, and then when you make that decision, then you go on the hill. And it's up to 4 days, 4 nights with no food or water. And you're staying in a very small spot, and you're praying and you're singing, and it's hot because it's Eastern Oregon, and there's giant pterodactyl mosquitoes, which I hate mosquitoes. And yeah, it's intense. But it was, the first one was quicker for me. But it was all about my father, who was one of my main abusers. And so it was a pretty intense one. But yeah, that was my first time with that big of a, like you said, preparatory and ritual, almost, I guess you said ritualistic kind of concept. Because my first thought was, why the hell would I put myself through something where I'm suffering to help myself deal with suffering? But then I realized that it's different. There's a different concept in the whole thing.
Wow. And I think one of the lessons that I remember so deeply from our first meeting you, and then getting to know the path that you were walking and the guardrails along that path at that time was I'll let you know if I need help, and you need to let me know if you need help, because unless you do, I don't know, and I'm not going to just jump in, which was a very big lesson for me, and still something I think about today. Not that everything has to be a lesson, but that was one big learning for me that really began to change how I looked at things, because it was so ingrained in me to constantly be paying attention to whether or not people around me needed help and needed something, and I shouldn't have to be asked to help. I should just jump in and help. And that was completely opposite of how it worked. And was that something that you picked up is the wrong word, incorporated during your time there? Is that correct, or was that even before?
Yes. No, that was there. Because like anybody, when you see someone who might be struggling or needing help, whatever, you step in. But the strong, you don't know what that person is or needs to be going through, so it's not your place to step in and stop what's happening. I'm not talking about stopping a car accident or someone choking, but if we're in a lodge especially, and the person next to you is wailing and crying, why do I want to stop them? Because that might be what they need to do right then at that moment. And afterwards too, if I needed to be on my own for a few, don't come looking for me, because I might need that space. So if I need help, I'm going to ask you for help. And so that was a huge. I incorporated it pretty easily because everybody around me did it.
And that's kind of not the normal around a Western culture. I had recently done a sauna rite, or held space for, conducted, whatever. And one of the things that I had said in preparation to everyone who was going into the sauna was that exact thing. It was like, okay, this is for each of us individually. And if you feel like you need to sit by the door, make sure you're at the door. If you get too hot, lay down. It'll be cooler. And I said don't. Please don't help someone else who's going through something in that. One, that is theirs. Two, that is mine. I'm the first person to step in as the person holding the space for the sauna rite. And you, as a participant, that is not your job. So I would like to set that right now. And I picked that up. I know from my time with you and learning that lesson, incorporating that knowledge or wisdom, maybe I should say it that way. And the part of that too, I believe, is, again, we tend to try and step in and help because watching other people go through something is uncomfortable for us. So, so thank you for sharing that wisdom and knowledge with me, because I do feel like that was something that was really profound for me, and a concept that shifted a lot of things for me, especially trying to leave the structure of my upbringing within a certain Christian sect. So now you kind of, because I know, because I was there, kind of rolled out of that, still walking the path that is yours. And at that point, when you became less of an attendee, of a community member, what then did your path look like? Because you and I have had this conversation a couple times where you have the Red Road, and then you also have the Celtic stuff, and you also have the witch stuff, and you also have the, what did your, we're going to call it your altar, because that's a good word. The place where you worshipped, it doesn't have to be a physical place, right? We're talking metaphorically. Mm-hmm. What did that look like as far as your spiritual space?
Well, I think also in the time of the community and Nakata, I was studying and starting to step into energy work, whatever that may be. Not studying Reiki per se, which I do now a bit, but I study different forms of energy, healing, energy work, energy touch. So I think I had, when I stepped kind of away after we were together, it was part of it was because I was tired of a misogynistic kind of concept in certain communities, and a hierarchy. I mean, I think there is hierarchy in certain things, but it should be able to shift and blend. It shouldn't be like, oh, you are the leader only. Things shift, fluctuate constantly. So I think within that, that started stepping deeper into my life. I started looking at things like that a little deeper. So I started, I kind of walked everything. And I also know that many people will say, well, you don't have a right to do these things. But my DNA is pretty mixed. Doesn't mean that I have the right for anything. But, I think if you do something in honor, then it's different than anything else. I don't know. That's a tangent for me, and a soapbox that I can stand on very strongly. But yeah, I think I was just open, and then you started doing your walk with Ingrid, and then I stepped into that and started learning as well. So, yeah, it's been very eclectic, if you want to say. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, I think knowing you walk very strongly with all of them, all of the aspects, and all of those pieces. So, do you see your spirituality as being a section? Like, I'll put it this way: as a day of the week, is your spirituality only on Sunday, or is it every day part of your day? And how have your experiences with the unseen and the unknown and the mysteries, how have they led you to where you are right now, and how you see the world right now?
So something that I was taught a long time ago by an elder was that every step you take should be your spiritual path. So you walk your path. And that's how I feel my life is. You know, it doesn't mean that I'm some monk or anything like that, because I don't believe that that's reality. But yeah, every step, every moment, I walk with my spiritual beliefs and my spiritual path. I think most people who know me know that I'm pretty loudmouthed about certain things and pretty strong about my beliefs on human rights and, you know, that kind of stuff. So I think my spiritual walk has helped me open my mind to things that other people may not want to open their mind to. There's some things that, you know, we can say woke and justice, but whatever. And I hate when people slam each other for those titles and words. I believe that I fought for years through the AIDS crisis and other things to step out of boxes, but yet now we are all in boxes.
Even more boxes.
One of the big things I think that walking with the things that I do and connecting to the quote mysteries that I do, it is the release of the binaries. So, you know, I consider myself a blend of male, female, which I think we all are. Maybe I connect to it differently. Now, people have told me I can't be non-binary because I look and act the way I look. You know, they've never seen me wear makeup, and like, well, that to me is drag. Everything's drag. So to me, it's all my energies, my insides. It doesn't always make it comfortable to live in certain areas, being as loudmouthed as I can be. But it also makes me stand strong in my convictions. So it helps, if this is what you asked, it helps in my work because things that people talk about that scare people don't usually scare me. So I'm not afraid of, quote, the monsters that you have hidden in your closet. Because I've seen the energies behind a lot of these things. So, you know, I don't understand some of those fears or the need to be better than others. When you first started talking, my first hit in my head was because I want to live in a van down by the river, but I know that's not what you were asking. But
no, but that's a good goal. That's a good life goal. You just have to find one here in Utah.
And if no one knows, that means, yeah, there are creeks here. They're not rivers. But I just can't imagine not walking with my spirituality. I can't imagine not taking my walks. And I don't just walk because I want to be semi-healthy. I walk because it also clears my head and it helps me connect to the land around me, which is beautiful. You know, yes, it's gone through some shit with the mining and some other stuff, but this used to be a lake. It's amazing. I mean, and I know that you've heard me many times be so excited that we live in a dry lake bed.
We've talked about Lake Bonneville so many times.
Bonneville. Yes, it always excites me. And now as I walk farther, I walk a little bit more into, I hate terms just shadow work or just left-hand path or just, I think I walk deeper into things that are just as important as the love and light side. I walk into things, I think I walk with things that are just real in nature. Nothing is perfect all the time. You've said it many times in some of your podcasts that, and Ingrid said it, the sun can burn. The light can burn your eyes. So you've got to kind of look at all of it. Was that your question, or did I ramble?
I think you answered exactly how you should have answered, because you couldn't have done it any differently. Yeah. So I have to say thank you for hanging out with me today on Blue Antler, Whispered Secrets and Hidden Wisdom, a Discover Your Path podcast, as we talked about your path and some of the whispered secrets and hidden wisdom of your path. And it's crazy that 7 years ago we opened Blue Antler. I don't even know. I can't remember. Had to.
I think it was 2017, wasn't it?
Yeah, so 6 years. And the one thing that we both wanted. So Blue Antler, for those of you who are new to us, Blue Antler was a retail store that was spiritual and metaphysical in nature. And it was one of the first in our town, and it was probably the first that actually focused on community building and classes and having a safe space or even a place, period, for people who had alternative ideas that were ranging anywhere from, pagan to Buddhist to Wiccan. And it was a place where we all could come and hang out, and it was great. And the one thing after we sold Blue Antler that I missed deeply was the community aspect, especially having now left and moved back to the area. That was one thing that we were missing. And so we've talked about opening Blue Antler back up as an individual space separate from any other entity for a long time. And the one thing that kept driving me was this idea of education and community and space. And, I kind of always felt like it needed to be, the retail store had to be there before we did anything else. And until this popped in. And now we have, just a podcast that talks about all of the things that we believe in, that we had done and wanted to do, and just sharing information about everyone's path and learning from it that way. So I appreciate you being on that journey with me, and I appreciate your time today, Tate. And so thank you. Do you have any last whispered secret or hidden wisdom that you would like to impart today?
First, thank you for doing this. This is great. I think the biggest thing that I want people to stop and think about is quit gatekeeping each other. Walk your path and do it with honor, and honor the ancestors, no matter who they may be.
Well, what did I tell you? He has a very interesting story, and one that keeps unfolding and just gets more deep and more rich, more complex as it goes. Like most of our lives. I hope you had a great hour with us, and that maybe there's a little something in there for you, or maybe for someone that you know. So don't forget to share our podcast with those that you know, especially if you like it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and like and all the notification things that are part of that social media ritual. We appreciate it, and we appreciate being able to be part of your day and your path.